But the reason why investors care about what's this founder's why is because they're asking, does this person really care if they build this company? Yeah. Or are they doing because it might be kind of fun and might make some money?
Welcome everyone to today's live stream, The Making of a Nobody. And I'm your host, Sejal Thakkar, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking a topic that's at the heart of startups and investing. What makes a founder truly stand out? You know, obviously choosing the right founder can make or break a venture. And so how do we truly gauge their potential? What qualities should we prioritize? How do we measure their ability to balance vision with execution, pivot when needed, and turn failure into valuable lessons? So to help us navigate this discussion, we are going to be talking with two incredible guests, our Chief Nobody, Mark McNally, and our Chief of Incubation, Andy Walsh. Welcome back. I'm going to switch things up today. So all right, everybody, you've been on this show, you've been following us for a while, and I usually jump into the questions that we've Andy and I have sort of thought about for this topic, but I'm going to surprise both Mark and Andy today with some rapid fire questions. This is where we put our guests in the hot seat and we hit them with some quick, fun questions to get their off the cuff insights. And so there's no overthinking allowed, just trust your gut reactions. Mark and Andy, are you ready? All right. If being a founder were a sport, which one would it be? Go, Andy.
I'd say Tough Mudder. So
Tough Mudder?
Yeah, where you're doing extreme courses and you don't know dry, wet, obstacles, people. There's a lot of things that come at you that you don't expect.
Okay, all right. Mark, how about you?
I'll say football. It takes a team. It takes lots of different skill positions to pull it off. There's a lot of different ways to score. You don't have to be great at all of them. You just got to figure out your way and be great at it. Culture is key. Getting the team to pull the same way is key. The most successful teams are great at doing comebacks, digging themselves out of tough spots. And football is a long season. And there's injuries. You'll lose people along the way, and you've got to adjust, and the next person has to step up. There is the metaphor of the quarterback, and as a leader, has a big impact. But without the rest of the skill players around that quarterback, he's got no chance.
Yeah, and I would say that being a founder is like playing a never-ending game of dodgeball. You're constantly dodging challenges, pivots, and occasioning flying investor pitch, right? So the next question is, how do you keep your cool when you're constantly getting hit? When the going gets tough, what's your go-to stress buster? Mark?
Usually when I find myself losing my cool, I realize that there's something there that is really been frustrating for a while. Otherwise I tend to be pretty patient. I tend to be, pretty pensive about how I move through things. But yeah, I think I'm not even so sure keeping cool is actually the requirement. I've been trying to say this to people around me as well. When I see it boil up from them, it's like, it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to not feel, but just dismiss yourself, remove yourself from interactions, give yourself some quiet time, go to the gym, take a half a day off, go spend time with your kids, walk your dog, whatever it is for you. Right. But sometimes you just need that perspective to kind of breathe through things. And when that I think the hard challenge with startups is sometimes you can get things stacked up back to back to back. And so if you've had multiple triggers and there's something that's super already triggering for you, you're probably not walking into it the right frame of mind. And it's better for you to just take a breath and try to avoid it. Otherwise, look, I think balance is balance. You need to have time with your family. You need to sleep. You need to work out. Those things usually are some of the most important stress relievers. But if you see something that's constantly digging at you, maybe it's because you're not hitting it head on, or maybe it's because you're not talking about it openly with the folks that are, a part of that stressor. And I do believe that for me, that tends to be the case when I get really frustrated with something. It's been a long time, and I probably just need to be a lot more direct about it and, change the the makeup of the team or change the strategy or remove myself altogether, or something has to be different. Otherwise it's going to burst.
Yeah. How about you, Andy? How do you keep it cool?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think for me, like I love Mark's piece there around the things like understanding yourself, like diet, sleep, mental health, all those things. So you're coming in match fit. And like anything in life, when you're in a good headspace, it doesn't matter what comes at you, you can handle it in the right way. I think communication is the second part for me as well, is thinking about context. Quite often it can be easy to be reactive when it feels like you're moving at pace, being able to stop and take a pause. And even for me, sometimes if it's like too much, I'll take myself out of the conversation or out of the situation and buy myself some time if I don't have an informed point of view, because I can feel like that there's tension and we're not going to resolve it. So the ability to be able to focus on what's the actual main reason. Like quite often you can be arguing about something that you're not even arguing about. It's just tension that overrides what you're actually having a conversation about. So coming back at it with a structured approach to be able to go, okay, like let me hear you out, let you hear me out, and then solving that piece. But yeah, I have my moments too.
It's part of being human, right? We're a work in progress. And especially when you're working with people that are different than you. And I love this comment that just came in from Kane Chamberlain. He goes, the team will be more effective if it's multicultural, diverse educational experiences, gender diverse, age diverse, disability diverse, and empowered to be leaders and ambassadors of the company. And thank you, Kane, for that comment. You know, it's one of those things when you're working with people that are different than you, you know, there are going to be times where you need to figure out how to effectively collaborate together, right? And so one last question before we jump into the regular questions we have planned for today. What is your favorite mantra or quote that to keep you dodging when it feels like everything's coming at you all at once? Andy.
I think I don't know if I have a quote, but a mantra would be the ability to step outside yourself and look at things objectively as far as all the context, because sometimes it can feel like it's just coming at you, but the ability to step outside literally and sometimes literally, more often than not metaphorically, to be able to go, okay, what are all the ingredients that are happening here, and how do I sort of process that in a way that has some kind of structure. And I'm a big advocate for active learning. Like I'm never going to be a finished product until the day that I die, and even then I may still learn after that fact. So that piece for me is like always making sure that I take out my own personal bias in that too.
Thanks. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, one of my favorites has been Teddy Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena," and it's really not a mantra. It's probably too long to play out here, but for those of you who are not familiar, it's paraphrased. It's like, I pity the fool who has opinions and critiques and judgments, but sits comfortably and quietly in the stands. You know, it's the person in the arena with the ball in their hands and laying it all out with blood, sweat, and tears that deserves all the credit and respect, right? And so when I feel, you know, as a leader, you know, and you guys are leaders in the organization as well, when you feel sometimes bombarded with challenges and everybody's looking to you to solve it, and sometimes people are angry at your choices or, you know, your lack of choices or whatever, right? I just remind myself, like, I signed up for this, and that is who I believe myself to be. And it's not always going to feel good every day, you know? And people that want to throw a jab or, you know, a judgment, they're sitting comfortably sometimes on the sidelines. What doesn't just, you know, especially if they're an employee or a partner or something, doesn't invalidate their perspective, but they're not in the middle of this arena like I am with the blood, sweat, and tears and scars and blood, you know, dripping down my face, you know? So, yeah, I love that one. Anytime I need to pep me up, I read that one, and it just, you know, I identify with that, you know.
Yeah, you've mentioned that quote before, Mark, and I really, that resonates with me. And obviously, as being a founder, you're going to deal with unexpected challenges, right? Like we've seen since I've joined the Nobody Studios journey, you know, we've seen a lot of things that have happened unexpectedly, and founders have to be able to weather these storms, right? And the ones that can are the ones, like you said, are the ones that stand out. And so what are some of the key traits, you know, that when we look at a founder's resilience and whether they're able to be adaptable or not, especially when they're facing significant challenges, right? Or if they need to pivot from their business model. What are some of the key traits we're looking for? Who wants to take this one?
I'll start. I mean, I think let me phrase it first. You could know somebody, or we could find amazing examples of people who don't exhibit the things I'm going to say, who have had successful founder experiences, right?
Mhm.
But as they say, even the sun shines on a dog's ass, I think that people can get lucky. People can be at the right place, the right time. There are plenty of successful entrepreneurs out there, or .com millionaires, that were just super freaking lucky and don't know anything about building a startup, right? But if I really think about building something from scratch, then I think that it has to do with, you have to have, first of all, that man in the arena kind of mentality, the man and woman in the arena. You have to be okay being bold. You have to be okay taking the critiques. You have to be okay with the high risk nature of what you're doing, and so I don't know if you can't have a thin skin, you have to have a thick skin. There's got to be something that drives you to get through the toughest times. It's an intestinal fortitude that says this means something so much to them that they're not going to let it fail, right? And so that's why you've heard, why has become a statement a lot in the last, 5-6 years, and people use that a lot. But the reason why investors care about what's this founder's why is because they're asking, does this person really care if they build this company?
Yeah.
Or are they doing because it might be kind of fun and might make some money, right? If it might be kind of fun and might make some money, the minute it's not fun, that person's gone, right? So you're looking for a bigger reason, right? Either they're working on the cure for cancer because they lost their dog to cancer. I don't know, right? There's something that means something to them, or tightly twined with their personality, their persona, right? So I think I'm always looking for that kind of belief systems. Now, we're unique as a studio because we can bring a broader group of people that we'll call co-founders into our companies, right? Because we don't need them to be the sole person carrying everything. We bring a lot of that as well, right? So if I'm looking at folks that bolt on to our journey the right way, I'm looking for emotional intelligence. I'm looking for culture fit. I'm looking for work ethic. Obviously, I think that goes without being said, but startups are hard work. You've got to be able to find extra muscles, extra energy every single day, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night, often on weekends. Like, you've got to find that. And so you're looking for someone who has that drive. Obviously, I think intelligence is important, but that execution muscle, you can talk to a lot of people that sound like the Bart, but what it actually takes to do these things is a heck of a lot of work, and sometimes it's not all things you love doing, but it's got to be done, So I'm looking for those elements. That goes, the other things that go without being said, but it's just, you're obviously looking for a certain amount of brilliance. You're looking for a certain amount of perspective about, market. You're looking for things that make that person unique. But I'm saying you could probably have someone that sounds really brilliant, but will never build a startup company. There's a lot of people who are talk. So I'm looking for that hustle. I'm looking for that. I'll find a way, and I will not let this fail. I'm looking for those kinds of elements. And it's really hard to interview for, and it's even harder to test for. It's harder to, even quantify, but it's like, it when you feel it, when you see it,
Yeah, thanks. And I wanted to just, shine a light on Neeraj Singh thanks Neeraj for joining us. And he said, I appreciate the humility, the curiosity, and the continued growth process with everyone here. Thanks, Neeraj. And I agree, Mark. I think execution is the name of the game, right? And I've seen a lot of founders myself where they have these brilliant ideas, but they struggle to translate those into tangible results. And so I think there's a delicate balance between seeing having that big picture thinking and then the day-to-day execution. So Andy, I would love to, what are some of the signs that, we should be looking for when we're evaluating a founder's ability to balance that strategic thinking and execution?
Yeah, 100%. So I think Mark covered some parts there that I would definitely identify too. And I think some of the native skills that people have that make them able to make instinctive decisions and quick decisions, because I sort of see it as like it's a cycle, right? Where you're taking something that's large and then you move forward. And within each of those sort of cycles where you're stepping forward each time is that ability to sort of be curious, but also be decisive. And what I mean by that is the curiosity part is, what are the things that I know? What are the things that I need to test and validate? And how do I give myself confidence in a very nimble fashion? And that sort of curiosity drives progress in a way where you have control and you can actively learn along the way. The resourcefulness that sort of comes around that as well is like problem solving. And I see it all the time, like the people that react to problems when they don't predict them versus the people that are proactive, identify the risks and are able to navigate that challenge. And we set the live stream up today talking about some of the moments when it's highly stressful, something's happened and you need to stop and deal with a major issue. If you know what you're walking into and you can anticipate some of those challenges and be prepared to a certain degree about that, you can continue moving at pace because you know like what's likely to come down the road. So I think that ambition is a given, curiosity is really important, and that means active learning and resourcefulness to be able to be decisive.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Andy, I'm curious to hear, because I think something that I've been, again, since joining Nobody Studios, right? And now I'm coming close to 4 years of being with the studio, right? I've heard a lot of founders tell me about their vision, and they paint this really inspiring picture of what their vision is. And then I'm done with this conversation and then I'm like, is this even achievable? Is this something that we could achieve? And so you can have the inspiring story and, you can have that charisma that I think a lot of times we look for in a founder. But if the vision isn't grounded in reality, or they don't have some of these skills that you and Mark are talking about, then executing that is going to be really tough, right? And so I'd just love to hear your thoughts on give some advice to founders out there about how can they have a vision that's both inspiring but also realistically attainable, or does it even need to be realistically attainable?
Yeah, and it's one of those ones, and we've talked about this probably a lot, as far as sometimes the biggest idea are the things when you're creating your market, and it's easy to be skeptical about potential success. It's like, well, the world's existed without that this long, then why would they need that now? And there's been many examples of those types of businesses, and like the big obvious ones I think we've even talked about, like the Airbnbs of the world or the Ubers, where it's like it's creating a new market and a new industry and staying true to that. But for me, like looking at founders as far as, and this is probably more how I would assess it, is the ability, like if they have a bold vision, it's how they actually build out a way to robustly test that, build it and grow and nurture it. And some of the things that I would look for is like within their career path, where have they gone into a job working for someone else, or maybe in a startup where they've had challenges and they're able to move forward. And there's a little bit of sort of natural innovation streak where they don't sort of rest on their laurels and do what everyone else has done, but they move through their career quickly. And they stand out from the pack by identifying things that they can solve for, the ability to create new opportunities within existing businesses. And they just think differently. Like they never take anything for granted as being the norm. So I think what I would encourage is like always challenge yourself to be able to go, here are the things that I need to prove to be right to move forward with confidence, but not be scared about bold dreams and visions within that. Like shoot for the stars, but have a level of control that allows you to do that in a way where you feel like you can hit certain milestones and know that you're making progress, and you're not going to get there immediately, of course. Sometimes you bounce around a little bit. So I think that those two things side by side is what I'd encourage people to think about.
Yeah. And I know you've talked about this on prior live streams, Andy, about how you communicate that vision. That's important. And I know Mark has said this, like Mark has said this several times, is start telling your story early and as often as you can. Start talking about that. Right. And so what are some things what are some tips that you have for founders about, how early is too early? When should they start talking about their vision? Like, are there things they need to do before they start communicating their vision out to other people, before they lose confidence, right? Because if you don't have it properly figure it out and you start talking about it, you might lose confidence of the people that are listening or investors, for example. So is there any rule, or it's okay to start talking about a half-baked vision, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll say I am the one that always says talk often and talk early, right? And I 100% believe that. And so you are going to, the reason why I say that is because I know that you learn how to pitch better. You'll learn more about your market because you'll have great investors like just beat you up one day and tell you things you didn't know, or ask you questions you weren't prepared for, or mention competitors you've never heard of. And those hurt. And that conversation is probably dead, but you got something out of it. So you almost have to be willing to, you're going to burn some relationships, unfortunately. Some investors are never going to take your call again because they thought you didn't know what the hell you're talking about, but you're ready for the next call, right? And so that's just my philosophy, right? Now, if there is a really golden partnership or golden investor, maybe you hold them off until you're farther along and you're more polished. But in general, conversations, socializing your idea make you better. I don't think there's any rules to, it has to be a certain way before you do it. I actually think you want to start talking early. You can actually watch how people react. You can watch their feedback, and it makes you better. And actually, it's actually a form of product development. Like, you might have a vision with like 10 things really big in your head, and they're all really important. But every time you pitch it, everybody lights up on number 3. I guarantee you by the 10th time you pitch that, number 3 is now number 1. Like, you are doing product development. It's almost like, user testing or market research by watching how people respond to your conversations. So yeah, I'm always a big believer, like, lean in, talk early, talk fast, talk often.
Yeah, and there's a comment here. I'd love to see what your thoughts are on this. Angel Cruzado, and I put it up here on the screen. It's kind of a long question, but he's interviewing with Skydeck Berkeley next week, and he's building a marketplace of coaches. And he says he has an MVP, and he's got all this other stuff, ICP, post-revenue, minority business certified, VC-backed partners, testimonials, and so on. But he's the sole founder with no co-founders. And so, he has a potential tech founder on deck, but he's trying to figure out how to frame the Skydeck pitch, given that he has 99.5% equity. Any thoughts on that?
My instinct on this one is like, don't hide behind the fact that you're a solo founder. There's nothing wrong with that. There's been many great companies. You could name thousands that have been successful with a solo founder. I think that it comes back to the same narrative, right? Like what your purpose is, what your skills are, and where you're at. And it sounds like, reading through sort of what stage your business is at, you've got plenty there that is a very strong story to tell. And I think for you, it's knowing how you scale post that, right? Like, who's your counterpart that you need to be able to be in the weeds with and test and learn and grow together. And that person can be an employee, doesn't have to be a co-founder, right? And finding that right person, getting them in early, and maybe they earn some sweat equity, come on and join your ride. But I think as long as you tell your story in a way that resonates and there's a clear opportunity for your business and you've got momentum, which it sounds like, then I would lean on that. Having a single-minded sort of purpose and vision is a strength. And I don't think it's something to be frowned upon or scared from.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Mark?
I would say it's always best in any conversation to be thinking about you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah.
So I'd be asking them what they bring to the table. You've got lots of other options. You obviously you're impressed by what they can bring, but you want to understand more how they work and what they commit to, and put them on the interview seat. Also, I think people get it wrong in terms of founders. I think a lot of people have this perception that founders are like 3 childhood friends went on a camping trip and they came up with this idea in the same moment together, right? Founders are, any key executives that join in the earliest stages of a company, right? Now, you could choose as a founder, say, I'm the founder, I created this thing, and everybody else are employees. You can choose that. But you could also find someone that's a CTO or a huge missing piece of the puzzle early on. Like, founder is just a title, right? you could have someone who's a VP of marketing 2 years into it that has more stock than some founders, right? Like, so I think what matters most is ownership. I don't think founders matter all that much in terms of title, but I do think that in the first year, it sounds like this guy's still early. I would say be very honest about still your weaknesses. You know, what are the weaknesses you have as a leader? And I would at least make sure you have one person that you recruit early to be your kind of partner in crime in this, and give them a sizable stake and give them a co-founder, you know, title, even if you've been at this for a year. There's no rule that says you can't do that.
Yeah, this topic is definitely resonating, and the chat is blowing up here. And I want to just point out a couple other comments that are coming in. Somebody from LinkedIn, it doesn't say the name here, but it says 1,000% tell your story early and often, right? And that's exactly what both Mark and Andy were just saying. And then our favorite, one of my favorite nobodies, Min Bageda, saying practicing your elevator pitch should be the same as how you should eat, little and often. I don't know about you, Min. I could put down some food though, so I eat a lot. And we've got some great. Angel said amazing feedback. Thank you both. And so we can't end the show without talking about failure, right? As being part of the startup journey. This is something that for a founder, the ability to be able to learn from failure and move forward, you know, and still move towards their vision is something that is super important. And so what are some things that we look for when we're, you know, for us at the studio, we're bringing a founder into the studio, or we're going to see who can lead one of our new codes or take one of our ideas off the board. What are some things that we look for? What are some traits that will let us know that this is a person that can, you know, handle failure, that can move forward, that can learn from these failures?
I mean, I think it's a great, you know, I actually don't like the word interview, but whatever words we use, if you're in a conversation trying to recruit someone or maybe bring them into your journey or vice versa, you know, I think discussing failures is an important talking point. If people don't have failures to offer up, right, then that's, I think, a warning sign. Either their lack of honesty or their lack of experience, right? But if they do have failures, it's always interesting to see how they talk about it. You know, do they discuss it in terms of deflecting and blaming others, blaming other things out of their control? Or, you know, do they talk a lot about taking accountability and ownership, right? There's a lot of ways to talk about failures, but you'll learn a lot if you just create a psychologically safe environment to say, you know, I've learned so much of my career from failures. I mean, we could talk for like 5 weeks, but I'd love for you to find one in your experience that we could maybe dissect. I'd love to learn about it, how you got there, what you do differently, what are your takeaways, and then give them the mic and see how they discuss it. If I hear someone talking a lot about, it was going to be great, but this guy, Andy, screwed me, you know, then I hear that again, it's like, okay, but then aren't you accountable that you let Andy into your universe? You know, like, I want to hear the accountability, because that tells me if I can work with that person or not.
I would love to hear about your thoughts on that question too, Andy, about failure. And I think, you know, just to add on to what Mark was saying is leading through failure, right? As a founder, you're going to have to deal with challenges. You're going to have to come through that failure, but you still have to be a leader during these times as well and lead your team if you have a team, right? So Andy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, 100%. And one of my favorite people that I love to listen to and read his work is David Epstein, and his book Range is one of my favorites as a massive recommendation. I assume he's listening because he's a big fan of mine too. So David, hi. I think one of the things that he talks about and does a great job of breaking down scientific research and making it digestible for the masses. And one of the things that he sort of talks about is 10,000 hours of learning, which he proved to be completely invalid with the research, which I find fascinating and one for another conversation. But the thing that I do love about what he talks about is to think like a scientist. And I don't like the word failure. I love experimentation. And it goes back to what I said before. If you're just designing a project and you know the parameters of what you're dealing with and you have some measures in place, then failure is not a word that exists. It's an experiment that hasn't worked out. But what you learn from that is powerful to move forward. And it's taking risk within reason on what you're doing. So having that framework of a hypothesis testing and learning and then building that out is really powerful. So I think for me, if I was to talk to a founder, I'd love to understand about where they've created an element of control with something that they thought would be right or wrong, and they wanted to prove or validate that, and the process they went through, and then what the outcome was. And for me, that's where I can learn so much about not only their process, but their mindset and how they take those challenges on. And that's how I think actively. And I love to be proved wrong. It's one of a humbling thing to do, and it allows us sometimes to find something that we never would have expected to find.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And so, Mark, what are, for the founders that are listening today's live stream, right? What are some ways they can get involved at Nobody Studios?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, we're an open book. You can reach out to anybody in this, organization. Mark at, Andy at, Sejal at, nobodystudios.com. Engage with us on social. If you have an area that you're passionate about, let us know it. If we are thesis driven, so we have certain things we're looking to build and certain ideas we're looking to build. But if there's a match, we'll bring you in. Maybe you don't have an industry or a business you care about so much, but you have a skill set that you love or you're really good at, you want to bring to the table. I mean, I always say this journey will be defined by the people we attract to it. So we're always humbled when people reach out, create a relationship. Some of the best people helping us today are people who were fans for 3 years and just recently got involved. So there's lots of right answers on how it plays out. I just say, let's just start a dialogue, and we can also be inspired. You might have an idea or some insight we don't have in a market, and we'd love to have just an open, constructive conversation and see if it fits within our thesis. And if so, who knows? Maybe we're building a company together soon.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, look, one of the reasons that I love doing these live streams with Nobody Studios, and we have a lot of different ones that we're doing and we're rolling out even more. You can learn about what we're doing at the studio, how we're building, what our values are, what we're looking for, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that you can look at. So all of our prior live streams are all on our YouTube channel. Do your research. I always tell people this is easy to bring people into the studio. It's do your research. Look us up on LinkedIn. We're always posting. We're building in the open. We're very transparent about what we're doing and what our needs are. So as Mark said, look at our website. And if you have any questions, join us, join our journey. You can submit your information online, and we'll be back again next Friday. So Neeraj, I do see your question here. So I don't want to leave you hanging. So even though we're at time, I would like for one of you to address this question, because he just popped this one in there. And I know, Andy, you're going to have a ton to say on this one. But he said, with founders around burnout, right, especially in the midst of an exit, do you have any recommendations? And just quickly, if you could just give them a couple of tips about, how founders can manage their stress levels, their burnout when they're going through an exit.
I mean, it's a big question. And Neeraj, I know that we are on LinkedIn together, and I appreciate the connection, and I'm happy to send you some pointers here. And I think that Mark touched on it before. It's like that, being aware of your mental health and having a clear line with what you can and can't do within that is really important, but also honing on your priorities. Like, what are the things that are going to make a difference today and tomorrow, and not trying to boil the ocean, as they say. So those two things, I think, allow you to get the right balance.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And Neeraj, reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you about this. And maybe that's a great topic for one of our shows, right? For us to unpack a little bit more, because there is a lot to that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Andy and Mark, for being on the show. And we'll see you again next Friday.